I want to start by confessing something to you. I think I'm good at knowing where I'm going and that I never get lost. In fact, the first time I ever came to Liverpool was to bring my wife to an interview. And on the way home, I didn't want to get stuck in the traffic. So I decided, despite never having been here before, to take a shortcut. Now, the problem with my shortcut was I didn't know any of the roads, and I just observed lots of cars turning off in a particular direction. So I just thought that they must know something that I didn't. Now, I wish I could stand here now and tell you that I've learnt that lesson, but the truth is I haven't. In fact, all too often when it comes to navigating my way through life, I still observe things, make assumptions that I might know best, and end up getting lost. So this brings us to our passage. The context of our passage is that the prodigal son is the third of three stories Jesus tells about being lost and found. I've often found that when we need to share shocking news with somebody, or news that is outrageous for somebody to hear, we often need to take them on a journey before they're able to hear that news, hear that message. I've seen this actually quite a lot in my own therapeutic work with people, that often the messages that people need to hear, they need to be on a journey, getting prepared to hear and respond to those things. And I think this is what Jesus is doing to us with these three stories. See, the first story is the story of the lost sheep. And we're presented with this picture of how it's so easy to gradually wander off. You know, the sheep is there eating away and munching away, and you can imagine it just wandering slowly through the field and getting further and further until all of a sudden it's lost. Then in the story, the second story, the one of the lost coin, we see how sometimes nothing particular seems to happen, but we just find ourselves in a different place, a place which is unfamiliar and lost to us. In both of these cases, we might see how things like this can easily occur, of no real fault of our own or no definite decision of our own. However, we might feel a sense of panic, and we might feel a sense of determination, like that person who's seeking for that lost sheep or lost coin. And I'm sure you've felt that before, when you've lost something and you have a sense of panic and desperation and look to find it. So we're on board with this concept of what Jesus is saying, that there's stuff that we have and it's valuable, and we'll just go and search, and we'll be really emotionally invested into it and search for what we've lost. But then Jesus tells the story a third time, the story of the prodigal son. We're now on board with this idea, those first two stories of being lost and found, and Jesus wants to push us a little bit further into a much more outrageous concept. So let's start with the younger son. We're presented with this younger man who decides he wants to get his inheritance now, and the father gives it to him. And he chooses to go off. He chooses the rock and roll lifestyle, the excitement of all of the things in the big city, so to speak. He's optimistic that this rock and roll lifestyle is going to make him feel fulfilled. And he probably enjoyed it at first, let's admit it. However, he only started to question stuff when things went wrong. A famine hit. He was in need. He was starving. Unlike any good Jewish boy would do, he went off to the unclean pigs and he worked with them, and he looked at their food and he was jealous. He observed that even the pigs were eating better than him now. So what did he have left? We don't really have any indication about his motivation. But what we do see is that he is willing to make that choice to go back to his father, to fall on his mercy and say, I've made a mistake. And we have the benefit of knowing what happens next, don't we? As the son starts to make this return home, the father is there and sees him in the distance and makes that decision to run to him and embraces him, and he celebrates with joy that this son who was once dead is now alive again. It's something reminiscent of those first two stories that Jesus tells, that something that was lost is now found, and there's celebration as a result of that. And what's more, the father doesn't just celebrate, but this son who squandered everything that he gave him, he gives him more. He says, get the best robe, get some sandals for his feet, put a ring on his finger. I want to celebrate that we are reunited once again. And we're now looking at the older son. Perhaps understandably he was upset. Why haven't I been treated like this? That's not fair. He refuses to go into the celebration. And once again, the father acts consistently. And rather than just waiting for him to return, he goes out and meets with him and pleads with him. Come on, son, join our celebration. But unlike the younger son, the older son refuses the father's offer, refuses to accept that gift of grace that he's offering. Ironically, the older son, despite all the outward appearances of remaining with the father and being faithful, has now chosen to be outside, away from the father's joy and celebration. In fact, he's lost. Like this older son, we may sometimes also feel that we have never been unfaithful in our choices, yet we can still be lost in spirit, lost of the joy and love that God shares with us. In fact, I'd say that all of us are lost at times. The main difference is just that sometimes some of us know it. Now looking at the older son. And so we get towards the outrageous truth of this story. Now we say it every week in our confession. We confess that we have sinned. We're all sinners. And this isn't a miserable or downcast message of despair. It's a message of liberation and hope. Because as we say we are sorry to God, as we confess our sins and return to him, God lavishes us with his love. This story, it reminds me of that humbling truth about our sin and the outrageous, active and aggressive love of God. Our sin might be making wrong choices. It might be wandering undeliberately off like the sheep. It might be making a deliberate choice like the son to choose better, to think that we know best and we know shortcuts in life. But equally, it might be a service which is begrudging, a giving to God which really is not done in joy, not done in love, and a jealousy of God's unjust love for mercy and for grace. The truth is that there is nothing good and nothing bad that we can do to change God's outrageous love and aggressive seeking of us, watching out for our return and hurrying out to welcome us in as we come back to him. The only question is how we respond to that love. As God comes to us, our task is simple. It's to fall heavy into his arms. God doesn't say, get clean and come to me, or come to me once you have served me faithfully for a certain period of time. God simply says, come. We don't need to be well motivated.